Hey, welcome to the live feed. Hey, welcome to the live feed. About to kick things off here. I'm going to be talking about ski boots. If you're a skier, let me know what you think. Have any questions? Yeah. So today I am talking about ski boots. Hi, how's it going? Hey, how are you, mate? Who's Batman? Nice to meet you guys. Today I'm talking about ski boots here. I'm talking about ski boots because it's important to me, and if I find it important on the mountain, I bet you guys might find it important as well. My name's JJ Vanette. I'm a professional skier out of Revelstoke, BC. I've been skiing for almost 40 years. I've used and broken almost every piece of equipment that I've ever owned. And I regularly go through all sorts of different issues with my gear. I am talking about my ski boots today and the fact that I'm actually looking for new ski boots. All right. Say so, we'll listen. Your story. Cool. So, I'm looking for new ski boots because my orange Technica Coaches are starting to break down. I try not and change ski boots out I change ski boots out as little as I can. Because ski boots are basically the first piece of equipment that connect your foot to the gear, and they transition all the energy from the body into the ski. In my opinion, this ski boot is the most important piece of gear on the market. Funny thing about ski boots and any gear really is every ski company makes a really high quality boot. They all make good boots. That is my professional opinion. The problem is not all high quality boots fit everybody the same. Every ski company uses basically a standardized foot that they come up with. So company X might say, hey, the heel pocket of this person's about this big. Well, company Y says it's that big. Forefoot, the arch, the flatness, all that kind of stuff. And so when you're getting ski boots, you really have to try as many on as you can. And so I'm a big advocate for going to a shop. Something you need to know about shops is shops often have partnerships with different brands. And so you can go to one ski shop and they'll have 5 or 10 ski boots from different brands. And you go to another shop and they'll have a different 5 or 10 brands. The more you try ski boots on, the better your feel can be. my story is that I was very fortunate right out of the gate to get into a ski boot that just fit my foot. I was young in ski racing. I had a boot that worked. In my teen years, I fell for the marketing trope. I saw the magazines pushing the new ski boots, the new athletes. So I want to be like that person. And I started getting the boots. And while all boots skied well, they created problems in my feet. And a poor fitting ski boot can do that, and it can cause long-term damage. I spent about 70 days in ski boots this year. The longest day on snow was, traveling 22 kilometers by foot, walking, climbing 1,600 meters elevation, burning like 6,000 calories that day. That much time in a hard, rigid plastic shell can really do damage. You can really mess up the joints, microfractures, you create pressure points, you can build bone spurs. Bone spurs, basically it's when there's enough hard pressure on a spot, the body starts to build up a fluid bubble, kind of like a callus. And that fluid bubble over time can calcify and become actual bone. And it can warp your foot. It's like having a little golf ball on the side of your foot, or a big golf ball. So having a boot that fits is very important. This is my go-to boot, and it's my go-to boot for a handful of reasons. It's got a walk mode, meaning that I can flip this back buckle up, and if I loosen everything off, I don't know how much I'll be able to flex it right now because it usually takes the leverage of your leg in the boot, but it creates a lot of articulation front and back. And it goes way more than this, but this is about as much as I can do just with my hand and not foot in it. My lightweight boot does the same, and if I loosen everything off, hopefully I'll be able to show you a little bit more articulation with this. We'll see. Yeah. There you go. So you can see this one has a lot more articulation. That's for when you're climbing up the mountain, one foot in front of the other. But going down, this boot, while both have the same kind of, we'll call it a flex profile of 130 flex, how they flex is different. This one is like a nice spring. It slowly absorbs you as you're going forward. So when you're standing in the boot, your leg's upright and you flex forward. And it starts off relatively soft, and the further you flex forward, the more the boot starts to resist you and gives you that kind of rigidity to like deal with the downhill forces. This boot, on the other hand, it uses a lighter weight, stiffer plastic, and it has this beam at the back of the boot. It's kind of like the other one, but it operates in a slightly different way. That beam really prevents the boot from flexing forward, meaning that when you want a little bit of cushion initially forward, it doesn't give. And so you get a lot of pressure on the front of your shins. And it's a little uncomfortable skiing experience. So, that's kind of like an intersection into, or I guess like a light dive into kind of the plastic of the boots. This plastic, it's a PU plastic. It's softer, it's thicker, and in colder temperatures, the plastic it gets stiff, but the plastic does a lot of the heavy lifting in thermally insulating your foot from the cold temperatures, in absorbing the pressures of the flex. But outside of that, this is just a more robust boot. This boot is kind of built like a tank. It uses traditional buckles that have these kind of like metal gates, and we call this a ladder. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's a lot of wear and tear, just the boots bashing around with skis and other ski boots, chipping the paint off. These ladders can often break. These boots have about 150 days of use in them, and they're holding up pretty well. This boot, it's a lighter gauge boot. It's still got the ladders, but instead of these ladders being metal, they're a plastic kind of carbon composite. It's to save weight, And instead of having this metal gauge, they use a wire. The wire, basically these lightweight boots, they do everything they can to reduce the weight. Because on those big days when you're climbing a mountain and you're getting after it, every step counts and every gram that you're lifting up the mountain counts. So these boot in like a 24.5. So we measure boots in centimeters. So 24.5 centimeters this way. I wear a 26.5, so 26.5 centimeters in length. It's like a, for me, it's like a 9.5, 10 US men's foot size. But in a 24.5, this boot is about 1,250 grams. And in a 22.5, a smaller shell, it's almost 1,900 grams. I think it's 1,850 grams. So it's a lot of extra weight. And these are both 26.5s, so more volume, more material, more weight. The nice thing though about this boot is they're not overly worried about weight. And so because they're not overly worried about weight, they can do things that are more user-friendly. So if you see this little screw here, that screw goes into what's called a T-nut. And that means you can have a nut and a screw that compress the piece of plastic and hold the buckle onto the boot. And that's really good because if you don't have a lot of money or resources and you need to change out the boot over time, you can. When those parts fail, it's really user-friendly to just unscrew that thing, get a new buckle, replace it, and go on. Well, in the journey to save weight, they rivet the boots on with these lightweight aluminum rivets. And those lightweight aluminum rivets, while they weigh a lot less than the T-nut, can be really difficult to repair or fix. You actually have to get a drill it out, replace it, and then you end up putting a T-nut back in because unless you have a rivet gun that can get in there, the T-nut's just the easy option. So it's kind of like when you buy this from the shop or from the company right out of the gate, you get the lightest weight thing. If you ever have to repair it though, you might be a little bit hooped. And when it comes to repair, this equipment in the backcountry can become a lifeline. When you're away from civilization, away from resources, and you're just with your group, if anything goes wrong, it can be a life or death issue. You know, if your gear breaks and you can't walk out properly, you're at a heightened risk of injury. And injury in the elements can be fatal. If it's slowing you down in getting out, you know, that can be life-threatening. So I really like gear that I can fix and replace. I've already replaced a couple of buckles on these boots. I've had to change out the T-nuts, even as much as these soles. It's really cool that the ski companies come with, they've started to integrate what's called a changeable sole. So this is the grip walk system, and I don't know if you can see there, it's got a little bit of inclination here and here. And what it does is, let's see if I can show it. Oh goodness. What it does is, when you're walking, it gives you a natural articulation, so it makes the foot walking motion feel a little bit more normal. That's new in the last couple of years. There was kind of a battle between what type of system they would use, and grip walk is the term and technology that came through. But when you're walking a lot on hard surfaces, you can really break down the base of your boot, and the shell's still intact, so they've made this replaceable. So it's got this kind of rubberized grip on the bottom here, and then I don't know if you can tell, but there's a thin layer of gray plastic, and that's kind of like an exoskeleton behind the rubber that kind of creates a little bit of rigidity for this rubber pad, and that connects to the hard plastic shell. When I replaced mine, that exoskeleton was absolutely thrashed. It was broken. It was basically just held onto the plastic. It was no longer doing anything of structural integrity. This boot is like driving a Cadillac. It's warmer, it's more absorbative, it's got a little bit more room in the toe box. You can be in this boot 12, 14 hours a day, and it's absolutely comfortable. This boot's a lot lighter, but with the harder plastic, it's harder to manipulate the shell. In the ski boot world, we have things like boot work where we'll heat up the plastic of the shell to deform elements of the plastic to fit oddities in our feet differently. And after nearly 40 years of skiing, I've got lots of oddities on my feet, little bumps and divots and high points, and one foot's a full size larger or smaller than the other foot. And so the ability to kind of manipulate the shell is important. And because of this plastic, it's harder to manipulate the plastic in a way that it kind of holds the shape that you manipulate it into. And so even if you can do what we call a punch in the ski boot, this plastic holds that punch better. You know, talking about ski boots, there's all sorts of different parts that maybe people aren't quite familiar with, and what makes a ski boot kind of as expensive or as good as it is. You know, I titled this this live feed $1,000 shoes, and it's really not far off. I think this boot retails for something like $850 US. So in the Canadian market, you know, we're looking at $1,000 to $1,100 for this boot off of the shelf. There's a lot of technology that goes into it. And really in the world of production, there's just not a whole lot of people, or as many people as you need to bring the cost of production down. Every ski boot has a very expensive metal mold to make the boot. And every time you go up a size, so whether it's a size 7, size 8, size 9, size 10, size 11, size 12, I think you have like a $60,000 or $80,000 metal mold just to produce that boot. And then, you know, they might only sell 10,000 pairs of these to the market each year. So, and then you're also in competition with every other boot manufacturer making a ski boot. But what makes these expensive is everything that goes into it. So these boots have, like I already talked about, the traditional ladder and latch system. Tecnica Blizzard did a really cool job designing this boot in that they spent a lot of time and money developing what we call the liner of the boot. This liner has a lot of components, like this hard plastic membrane, which kind of protects the shin when the inside's got this nice soft cushy cushion. It kind of creates a layer of protection when the boot's flexing against the top edge of the ski boot here. So it's, you know, layer upon layer of cushion, you know, very stiff, subtly stiff, very soft. A lot of ski boot manufacturers will use cheaper, less expensive materials on their liners because the general public just don't know what they don't know. And if you don't know, you don't realize what you might be missing. And so as you move into a higher performance boot, a lot of the times athletes will go to aftermarket liners, Intuition, ZipFit, I'm sure there's others out there, companies that build higher performance internals. The problem is, I already discussed that every ski boot manufacturer makes a slightly different internal foot size. And so while this boot might theoretically be the same length and size as another boot manufacturer, the internal proportions are different. So Tecnica leaned into that and said, hey, why don't we just make a better liner that fits our boot? So this fits all the inside kind of proportions of their shell. They are able to integrate the heat moldable foam. The nice thing is they've also got this additional rigid structure so that when the foam cools and this rigid structure cools, you actually have this like exoskeleton on the liner. So just more layers of depth. They've integrated all sorts of different levels of adjustment. So, you know, when you're in a ski boot, you can get these pressure points that really affect the foot, and your foot's really sensitive to them. And so everything, even just like the stitching here, your foot could feel that stitching in the boot when the boot's clamped down. And so instead of having stitching on the toe where your metatarsals and your toes are, you can really feel everything, they actually have just gone to, it's like a Velcro, where there's no buildup of material. Yeah, so you know, if you're looking for a high-end, high-quality product, and Tecnica fits your foot, that was kind of a real plus when kind of getting into this boot. Another thing that a lot of people don't know is that inside the boots, they come with what's called a footbed. And out of the box, that's the one thing that companies can't really make awesome, because everybody's foot shape or arch is different. So the footbed's usually just like a flimsy piece of plastic. But at your ski shops, you can get custom-made footbeds. It's a little bit different than what a podiatrist might recommend for your foot. And it's maybe not somebody with the same level of education or schooling. But basically, you go to the ski shop, and they have this gel mat that you stand on. And they pump it full of air, and then pull a vacuum on it. And while you're sitting in a neutral stance, it maps the arch of your foot. Then they take this piece here and they heat it up in an oven. And they basically vacuum it to that arch that the gel pad has of your foot. And it creates a mold of your foot. Then the shop techs will come in and they glue in these additional foam pads. So while the toe is pretty flexible, this arch support underneath is quite rigid, and it absorbs and supports the arch of your foot. I skied nearly 20 years without footbeds, and in a younger body, a more resilient body, and a body that's able to recover faster, it wasn't an issue. However, I wish I would have had custom footbeds from day one. Because spending 100+ days in your ski boots is a lot of pressure on your foot and all the little intricate pieces in your foot in really hard, rigid plastic shells. And the damage that you can do to your feet is almost irreparable. And after 20 years of kind of messing my feet up, by the time I got footbeds, I was dealing with issues and growth problems that kind of need surgery to fix. And so the footbed is just stopping the degradation or depletion of my foot strength in the different areas. So skiing's an expensive sport. There always seems to be areas at which people are trying to get money from you. The one area that I would go to above all else is I would spend money on ski boots and my feet. And I would then start looking at skis secondhand, binding secondhand, ski poles and things like that. But your feet are the thing that connects you to your skis. So ski boot companies, because ski boots are expensive to make, I'm just putting my ski boot back together here while I'm talking. They try and sell the same product for a handful of years. They might change up the colorways a little bit, the color combos on the buckles, or the plastics, the color of the plastic that's injected. But because the metal molds to make the ski boots are so expensive, they try and produce the same boot for a long time to kind of recoup their costs. So I got this boot about 8 months before it was released to the public. And then I've been skiing in it for another 2 years after that. And it's got about 150 days in that specific ski boot. And after about 30 days, manufacturers will say that the plastic is actually worn down and broken down, that it's no longer the same flex or rigidity of intent, which can be a big deal for ski racers that are like high-level athletes in specific conditions. But for somebody that skis all over the mountain and whatnot, and generally softer snow, that boot's held up fine for me. The main issue is actually that the softer internal core, that shell, it's broken down over time. And so I'm ready to kind of maybe look at replacing this boot. This boot, I also ski pretty regularly. I had an older version of this. Tecnica updated this boot, and they did a complete overhaul of the shell and the liner, and fixed a lot of issues that people had with the boot. The problem is, I preferred how the old shell skied over this one. The liner is upgraded, but in my opinion, the old shell skied better for the way that I skied. And it's really important to recognize that when something is working for you, why it's working and how it's working. And so this boot over here, now almost 2.5 years old, I would imagine that in the next 6 months to a year, Tecnica's would be planning on making a new boot and kind of replacing that design. And that's good for me, because that means that any retailer that's selling off that boot right there is likely looking to sell it off right now because it's the summer and winter's over, so you're going to be getting it at a discount. Or if Tecnica announces a new ski boot, there's going to be a lot of marketing to push and buy that new product for all the investment that's gone into the development. And that ski boot that works really, really well with my foot could be something that I could get for a really good deal. I unfortunately sold the older version of these thinking that they were the same before I actually skied these. And this was a prototype boot that was sent out to me when I was still working with the company. And, you know, I didn't realize as many things had changed in the design. And so I kind of wish I had the old shell, but, you know, it's still a great boot. If any of you guys have any questions, I would happy to answer. I think Batman's left the chat here. He was talking to me. But yeah, that's kind of the world of ski boots. They're very expensive tools, but they can make or break your day in the mountains. Where are you guys from? Also, there's looks like there's one person in chat right now. There was a bunch earlier. And I'm kind of new to these live streams, so I'm going to try and do kind of a little bit more of it throughout the summer. There's a bunch of gear and stuff that I'm looking at reviewing and kind of changing up. I kind of try and find a baseline of the equipment that I use and, you know, share the knowledge that I have of the gear that I have with you guys. Well, I think that's going to kind of cover it. I've a little talked out of boots unless I haven't answered something that you are looking for. But thanks for tuning in, and stay tuned for the next one.